Hi, I'm Anne-Marie from Brambleberry.com, and today I'm coming at you with a body care video. One of the most frequently asked questions we get in customer service at Brambleberry is, what's the difference between a body lotion or a lotion and a body butter or a butter? And so this video is going to tell you the differences and do two different projects with you and for you, a whipped body butter and a lotion formulation and a lotion recipe. So what's the difference between the two? Well, really simply, most people consider a body butter to be an anhydrous product. And anhydrous is just a fancy way of saying, hey, there's no water in that. So what that means is it's just oils and waxes, or oils and butters, or oils and butters and waxes and extracts. There is no water added to it. Conversely, a lotion is water, oil, and emulsifying wax. Emulsifying wax is a fancy way to say, hey, this is a chemical ingredient that helps the oil and the water combine and turn into a lotion rather than something that's totally separated. So this is a great example of an oil-water combination that has completely separated because there was inadequate emulsifiers put into it. In this case, I was trying to use one of the polysorbates, which are emulsifiers, to make a liquid sprayable lotion. Didn't work because the emulsifiers were not strong enough. The recipe we have for you today is a beautiful lotion that thickens up wonderfully and can be put into jars. A few things to note when making lotions is, one, since there's water in there, you are going to need a preservative. Some of my favorite preservatives are Phenonip, Germaben 2, or Optiphen. Today we're going to be working with Optiphen because anything that has water in it can grow mold and bacteria, and if you have an open cut on your hand or anything like that, it can get into your body and your system. So it is illegal to make deliberately unsafe products in the United States. The FDA regulates this, and not using a preservative that was a broad spectrum preservative would actually be considered an unsafe or illegal product to make. So make sure when you're formulating that you're using a safe, broad spectrum preservative added in during the cool down phase, which is a fancy way of saying at the correct temperature. If you really like to stay totally all natural and you don't want to use preservatives at all, no matter what, then a solid body butter or a body whip is for you. Since the product contains no water, you don't need a preservative. So lotions can be a wide variety of textures, meaning they can be more watery or thicker. The one I made for you today is definitely thicker. If you wanted it to be more watery, you'd use more water, less shea butter, so less solid at room temperature oils, for example. And then you would make sure that you're using great emulsification systems, maybe a co-emulsifier, a couple different emulsifiers to get a more thin, like a beautiful facial serum, for example, would use a few different co-emulsifiers versus this one that just uses one big heavy hitter, the Emulsifying Wax NF, National Formulary. So you can make them thinner and thicker depending on what you want. So that does make body lotions very versatile. You can just put them all over your skin versus these guys. I find these whipped body butters to be so good for like skiing, or if I'm going to go hiking or exploring any place where I'm going to be dry, like in the desert. So good for your elbows, your knees, your feet. Put some socks on there, but a little heavy for a total full body use typically. For this particular body lotion, I'm using sunflower oil, shea butter, squalane oil. I love squalane. It's one of my very favorite ingredients, and it is used in a lot of high-end skincare. Going to be using a champagne extract for its antioxidant capabilities. And then finally, I'm using a broad spectrum preservative, Optiphen, which helps to prevent mold, bacteria, and any number of bad things that you don't want growing in your lotion. The fragrance I've chosen for this today is Pear Prosecco. It's a delightful, wonderful, crowd-pleasing, green, kind of sparkly fragrance, keeping in mind that since it's a lotion, you want to use it at low usage rates so you don't end up with a perfume. And then, of course, we have our emulsifying wax. The emulsifying wax is what keeps our oils and waters emulsified, meaning mixed up. So if you just did oil and water together, we all know what happens, right? It separates. You need an emulsifying wax in order to keep this entire project together. Now it's time to get started. Please note that I'm using distilled water, and I've heated that up in the microwave so that it is about 170 degrees. I've got my shea butter separated out. And the reason I did that is because I have found that when I melt it in the microwave with the rest of my oil and the like, sometimes, every so often, it gets a little bit grainy. And so I just like to use the more gentle way of melting it using our emulsifying wax and our sunflower oil. I'm weighing everything out, because lotion making is indeed a big time science. So you always want to weigh everything out. You don't want to just be eyeballing it or going by volume, because the different oils and waxes have different specific gravities, which means 5 ounces of this will have a different volume than 5 ounces of our sunflower seed oil. If you are making this for sale, I want you to make sure that you are wearing a hairnet, and you are definitely 100,000,000% not scooping your product in by hand. You're wearing gloves. For the sake of this video and this tutorial, I am not doing either of those things. You'll notice the size of this container. There's not a lot of headspace in there. If I was to do this 10 ounces of my emulsifying wax and my sunflower oil and something that had a lot of headspace, the air on top of here can superheat up, causing your Pyrex or your glass container to break. So keep that in mind when you're melting this in the microwave. And if you're worried at all, you can always use a double boiler. I'm gonna go ahead and start melting this in the microwave. It'll probably take me, I'm guessing, about 2 minutes. Now, our sunflower and emulsifying wax is fully melted down. We know that because it's clear. I'm going to do a quick temperature check on it. It's 158. And so now we are going to start slowly melting our shea butter in here. And it probably won't melt all the way, so I want to keep that in mind. We may still have to give it a really quick hit in the microwave, but there is some thought out there that if you melt the shea butter slowly and gently, that it's less prone to causing graininess in your products. And I might be an old school crafter, but I have found that to be the case, especially when it comes to lip butters and body balms, which we'll get into in another part of this episode. So now I'm just slowly, gently letting the heat from the sunflower oil and the emulsifying wax melt my shea butter until we are ready to mix with our hot water. So while this is melting, I'm gonna go ahead and measure out my hot water. So now I'm gonna do a really quick temperature check to see how much this is dropping. We're at 166, that's perfect. And we're at 132 with this. So I might want it just a little bit warmer. The final thing I want to do now that our shea butter is fully melted just naturally, I'm going to put in my 1 ounce of squalane. And I didn't microwave the squalane because it is such a beautiful, delicate ingredient that I didn't want to just zap it. In theory, I could have put it in with the oil phase earlier, but I wanted to make sure that all the properties of this were totally preserved. You can also put it into the cool down phase like we do with our extracts, our fragrance, and our preservative. But in this case, I'm putting it fully into the oil phase. And now we're ready to make lotion, and this goes really fast. I've got all my jars lined up, and first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna pour gently into this hot water, and you can see it starting to emulsify right away. So that is emulsification, that process where the water and the oil and the wax mixture bind and turn white. That is the emulsification. Now we're going to be taking our stick blender. We're going to move everything together very quickly so that the bonds reform between the water, oils, and emulsifying wax. This has been fully bleached water, 5%, so this is totally clean and ready to use. And here we go. So now I'm checking temperature, and the reason I'm doing that is because it's important that we add our preservative, which in this case is our Optiphen, at 160 and below. Same with our extract. Our extract is precious, heat can damage it. We're at 142, and I want to just go ahead and stir this a little bit longer. I don't see any separation. I'm pretty sure if I go ahead and pour it in the jars, it won't separate, but in this case, it is always better to be safe than sorry, because it's no fun to have anything separate, and then you have to like pour it back in, heat it back up, put more preservative in, all that stuff. So we're just gonna go ahead and stick blend for at least a minute longer. So this is beautifully emulsified. It looks like kind of a thicker than milk, so I can tell that it's beautifully emulsified, and we're at 136. So it's time to add our preservative and our extract. I'm wanting to make sure I really preserve the preservative and the extract, so it's always below 160. So that's in your cool down phase that you want to add these, and it's by weight. I'm doing 1% of the extract and 1% of the preservative. And then after that, I'll do 1% of the fragrance. There we go. And then with the extract, it's not that big of a deal if you end up using a little too much, because that can be used all the way up to 10%. So all that is doing, if you use it a little too much, is you end up, well, the lotion is a little more expensive. Now with the preservative, it is a big deal. you always want to be really good with weighing out your preservative, because the preservative is what inhibits that mold and bacteria growth in your product. So now I'm going to give this a quick stick blend, and then I'll add my fragrance and optional some mica in case you want just a little bit of shimmer and shine and this to look kind of fun and glimmery. Now that we've blended in our extract and our preservative, it's time to add the fragrance. And again, I'm going to be doing the Pear Prosecco, going at a full 1%. And you could do 0.5% if you wanted. That would definitely make a much lighter scented product. It's totally up to you. Some people like a lighter scented product, so if you did that, you would again be using 0.5% instead of the full 1%. I'm gonna go ahead and do about half of mine with my mica. That way half of mine is uncolored and half of it's colored, kind of a personal preference thing. And that fragrance is blended in really well. And now it's just time to pour into our containers. And one more thing I want to mention is I never put the lids on my containers until this has fully cooled down. The reason for that is the water can evaporate onto this lid and then drip back down into your lotion. And now for a little bit of fun, I'm going to put a little bit of mica in there. Not too much, just a little bit to get it a little green. And don't worry, it will not turn anybody's skin green at this amount. Whew, that sage green mica is perfect for the Pear Prosecco fragrance. It is just the lightest of green. And again, it's not going to do anything but provide a little bit of interest, little bit of kind of cool color. It will not dye your skin when used in such small amounts. I used under 1/8 of a teaspoon for half of the batch. So it was a really small amount. And now it's time to just let these sit out, and then I will cap them as soon as they have cooled. And notice I didn't fill these all the way up. That's because we need a lot of headspace for this seal. So keep that in mind as well if you're using the Brambleberry bale jars. So for our solid body butter or whipped body butter, we're going to be using coconut oil, shea butter, a little bit of oat oil, and oatmeal, milk, and honey fragrance. This has been one of Brambleberry's top sellers now for over 20 years. I hope you get to try it and figure out exactly why it's so warm and inviting. And some arrowroot powder to help cut down on that oily feel that solid body butters or whipped body butters can get. So first things first, we're gonna weigh out 14 ounces of shea butter, and then we are going to whip this to make sure that there's no clumps in it. So it's a multi-part process, but since there's no heating and there's no like water to worry about or preservatives, it goes pretty fast. So though this is an anhydrous product, meaning it doesn't contain water, we still want to follow good manufacturing practices. So if you are making this to sell, you're gonna need your hair back in a hairnet, you're gonna need to be wearing gloves, kids, pets in another area, and you'll have to have a properly secured facility in the sense that like you need to be able to wipe it down with bleach water, can't be near an open door, that kind of thing. So I'm going for 14 ounces here, and then I will be whipping it like I mentioned. While I'm whipping it, I am going to take my coconut oil, which is solid at room temperature. I'm just going to pop this in the microwave and I'm going to melt it down so that way I am using my time efficiently. So you'll notice this has started to climb out of the bowl. So I'm going to take my fully sterilized utensil here and just move everything down to the middle of the bowl. It's got a really nice whipped consistency right now. I love how this is. Now, you might be tempted to be like, well, I'm just going to use it like that. You could use it just like that, but I will say that the coconut oil is really good to have just because it adds to a little bit of slip in here. It also lowers the total price point of your body butter, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So next, I'm going to be adding in my oat oil, and oat oil comes from oat kernels, and it can be cold pressed or extraction method pressed, and it is highly nutrient rich for our body butter. And just like with lotions, you always want to be weighing everything out because this is still a science, even though we don't have the emulsifying wax. So this is going to create a slightly softer texture that has a lower melt point, and if you put too much liquid into your shea butter, which is kind of like this hard inert substance, and you turn on the mixer too high, you'll notice that liquid oil sprays everywhere. So keep that in mind when you are adding in your oat oil. So start the blender on low. And just like the last time, I'm gonna take my utensil here and I'm just gonna scrape down the sides. And again, if you were doing this in a larger batch, like say you're using a Hobart mixer or a KitchenAid because you're getting ready to sell, I want you to be keeping in mind, like you wouldn't have just rested this right there on the counter. You'd be putting it completely in a sterile environment. Next, we're going to add our coconut oil. The coconut oil, however, is warm. So I'm gonna add it at the very last minute and I'm gonna add it very slowly because I don't want it to melt my shea butter. So while I'm waiting for this to cool down as much as it possibly will, while still remaining its consistency, which is at 76 degrees, it starts to harden, I'm gonna add in my fragrance, my oatmeal milk and honey. Just like with lotions, you have to really be considering the final smell of your product when you're adding in your fragrance oil. You just don't want it to be too strong of a scent. And so in this case, I'm just going with 6 milliliters because I want it to be a really warm, comforting scent, but not be so strong that it overpowers people in your presence. You don't want it to act like a perfume. Finally, the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be adding about a tablespoon of arrowroot powder. I'm gonna go ahead and add that now as well, just a little bit early before I start drizzling in my coconut oil. To make sure that my arrowroot doesn't clump at all, I'm gonna have this turned on when I'm slowly adding my arrowroot. All right, now it's time for our very final ingredient, which is our coconut oil. And again, that coconut oil is hot, so we're gonna add it very slowly. We're only going with about 4 ounces, so not that much. And we will be whipping the entire time to keep this beautiful frosting-like consistency it currently is. So the final part of this is getting this into jars. So there's a couple different ways you can do it for ease of not looking like a fool on camera and also really making this faster for us. I'm just gonna go ahead and glop these in using a large spoon, or you can pipe them. Now piping is not nearly as easy and you do need a frosting tip and all that, but they sure do look cute. So I'll let you decide how you wanna do it. But when someone gets like past this little part, it all looks the same anyways. These are now fully splooshed. I'm gonna wipe these little guys up, and then unlike lotion, since these are totally like room temperature already, I just have to cap them and then label them and they're ready to go. These little guys have the gold bursting beads on them. They're totally decorative. They don't really do a whole lot except look very cute on our piped ones. But so you have a choice. You can pipe or you can sploot, or you can fill with a spoon. Now, if you liked this departure from our videos, because usually I am talking a lot about soap, please let us know down there that you want more body care recipes or more different videos about whatever, hair care, how to make bath fizzies, whatever. Tell us down below and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. And when you're making all these goodies, I'd love to see it. Please hashtag it, BrambleOn on all the socials. Until next time, you guys, happy crafting.